Welcome to the Sharpway Show on a very special time today. It is a little bit past 3 p.m. on the East Coast. And yes, I know you're saying, Larry, usually you're a 7 p.m. guy. That's true. I will be on tonight at 7 p.m., but I'll be actually arguing about marital issues. I know, sounds odd. But yes, I will be talking about marital issues tonight at 7. Today, I have a very special guest on. Someone who I followed for a bit, someone who I'll actually be together with at Freedom Fest coming up here in July in Memphis, Tennessee, July 11th through 16th. I will be there. We can see both of us if you want to. He is an economist at the Heritage Foundation. He is a fellow at the Mises Institute and a former professor, the man, the myth, the legend, Professor Peter St. Onge. How are you, sir?
I am great, Larry. Thank you for that fantastic introduction there.
There we go. Yes, absolutely. And if you want to follow him, you can absolutely. If you want to look at the notes I put in YouTube and also on the Facebook page, you can check him out and follow him. But the easiest way to follow him is just go on Twitter and please follow him there at Prof. St. Onge. That's PROFSTONGE if you're listening to the podcast. That will help him out. He's given us some love, so let's give him some love in return. All good. So I want to ask you, I think, what is one of the biggest issues that everyone's talking about and been talking about for a while, and that is inflation. We're all feeling it in some way, shape, or form, some more than others, but we're all feeling it in some way, shape, or form. And I think you have people who are yelling back and forth about why and whose fault it is. And Bidenomics now is the awesome Biden economics that's solving all our problems now. Clearly, we have inflation, but I think one of the issues we find is people saying it's all about greedy corporations, and then libertarians saying the opposite, it's all about the Fed. What's the real answer? Is it a combo? Is it one or the other? Is it both? Is something else? What's the answer?
Yeah, it's a question of, are you blaming the disease or are you blaming the symptoms, right? So symptoms of inflation include, workers asking for raises, businesses raising their prices to cover their costs. So these are the symptoms, but that's not what's causing it.
Okay.
Right? I mean, the idea that corporations get greedy and then they launch inflation. Okay, well, you would have to believe that like last year, corporations were not greedy. They were generous and they didn't want money, but now all of a sudden, they lost their mind and now they hate us. And so now they suddenly got greedy. Tom Woods has a nice line on that. He said, when a plane crashes and they ask you why it crashed, you don't say gravity. Okay. In other words, if you've got some constant that always exists, like businesses are always greedy. They're always trying to raise their prices. So why is it that all of a sudden all the prices go up? And I think, the money printing is the overwhelming reason of it. It has been through history. Yes, you can have weird things happen. For example, the oil embargo, or the government could say, shut down everything in the world. And then now you've got a shortage of stuff. So there are some, what economists call real effects, meaning not monetary.
So hold on. So you're saying it is more than one thing, which you're saying. You're saying it's the debt that we have, right? The printing of the money, but it was also the lockdowns too. Are you saying it was both of those things? Or no, am I reading that wrong?
Yeah, the lockdowns contributed to it. The overwhelming impact of inflation these past 2 years has been for money printing. And we know this because there are a lot of countries, specifically in Asia, that did not print money the way they did in the West. They didn't lock down as hard. Therefore, they didn't have to bribe their people into accepting lockdowns. At the height of COVID, you could go out drinking at a bar in Japan. You could go out to eat. The most they did, they had bars close at 10 p.m. Okay. But you could see videos of people walking around Tokyo and the bars are packed. So they didn't have to buy the lockdowns. They didn't. And in fact, the inflation in places like Taiwan or Korea or Japan, it's fairly normal. Japan is a tiny bit elevated. Korea and Taiwan are they have the standard inflation they've always had. So what we've been suffering here in the U.S. and in places like Europe or Canada, that has been almost entirely money printing. And, the trick here is that central banks, it's like joining a cult where you have to pretend gravity doesn't exist, okay? And you have to keep coming up with new, strange explanations for why things keep falling down. In the case of central banking, the one sort of physics, phenomenon that they don't want to believe is that they do not want to believe that money printing causes inflation. And so they are constantly, they've got, hundreds of people.
They have MMT, right? Which is the magic money tree.
That's exactly. So they've got hundreds of PhDs who are paid to sit around and come up with creative reasons why prices are going up. And they're always going to try to go after those. Either they're going to go after the real effects, they're going to try to put it all in the real effects column, or they're going to go after the symptoms. So specifically, there's been a whole bunch of central banks criticizing people, small businesses for raising prices, and criticizing workers for asking for raises. And there was actually a tweet from the European Central Bank, and they said, what do you think? Is it mostly corporations raising prices, to seek profits, or is it mostly workers raising wages? And I mean, you can almost see them trying to set the people against each other. Right? They're like, hey, what do you think? Was it the greedy workers or the greedy capitalists? I mean, it
wasn't us. It wasn't us.
For sure. Right, yes. Whatever you do, don't blame us for printing $9 trillion. Right? There was a point in the U.S. where
$9 trillion? Is that real?
$9 trillion among all the banks in the world. Right? Wow. In the U.S., there was one point where $1 out of $4 had just been printed. All right. This has been known since the beginning of time to drive inflation. If you increase the money supply by 40%, that always leads to inflation. What's amazing is that it hasn't been worse than it has. And the reason is that people saved a bunch of it. But then to turn around and put out this crap, how, who do you think really caused the inflation? Was it the workers or was it the capitalists? It's just completely transparent.
Well, I have to go one step further here, right? I think that you've brought up the idea that all of this stimulus that we put out was similar to, and I've never heard this before until you said it, similar to the Soviet 5-year stimulus plans, which clearly didn't work, right? I mean, it put the Soviets under, right? So, or the Great Leap Forward, or, like in China, that you have put them, that's what we're doing. We're putting so much money into stuff that it's literally causing us, it's destroying our economy, it's breaking us.
Yeah, this is happening all across the West. It's happening in the US, Europe. And they're essentially plowing out these massive stimulus programs. A lot of it goes to green energy or, whatever their lobbyists have asked for.
I see it in New York here all the time. Absolutely.
For sure. And what that ends up doing is sucking resources away from the real sector. Not only does it suck money away, it sucks away workers, materials. There was a point during the supply chain crisis, what was it, about a year and a half ago, where in Los Angeles, the warehouse vacancy rate was like 1.3%. All right. If you've ever tried to park your car in a garage with 1.3% vacancy, the way that feels is there ain't none. Okay.
Right.
I mean, there was nothing available in LA. And the reason was because they couldn't get the steel. They couldn't get the workers. Why? Because you had this stupid infrastructure thing, rebuilding the racist overpasses. Right. So now, whatever needed to be built, right? The vast majority of that stuff is allocated politically, and it certainly did not need to be built right at the moment when you couldn't get anything. Try getting a washing machine or a refrigerator. If your refrigerator broke down, good luck. Why? Because it's all hogged away.
I mean, don't you hate racist overpasses? I mean, I do. Don't we all hate them?
My entire life, I keep looking for an opportunity to tear one down.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly. So something at least.
They just took one down in Philly. So I guess there's that.
That's good. But with this in mind, I want to go to the next piece, which is you've said something which I thought, again, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is you said things that I haven't heard, and I pay attention, right? So I pay attention and I haven't heard it. So I know the average American has no clue because most people aren't paying attention. They just they're living their own life, doing their own thing. You think the European banks may need a bailout coming up here? I mean, I thought Germany was the super economy And it was going to, I thought there was no chance that Germany was going to support the entire EU, right? That's what we were told.
Yeah. Yeah, the German voters were really given a bill of goods on this Eurozone. The Bundesbank had been, the Bundesbank and the Swiss National Bank had been the two adults in the room. They were very conservative, very careful, very low inflation, because, of course, Germany had the terrible Weimar experience, and then all the, everything that happened after that, for Germans, that's something that they want to avoid. And so when they put together the euro, that was one of the big sort of political goals, was to reassure Germans that they weren't going to become piggy banks for all these, basket case borderline banana republics, and especially in Southern Europe. And guess what? Didn't work. So now the Bundesbank is actually headed for a taxpayer bailout, which I think for your German listeners, that's shocking.
Yes.
People did not think that, that was not on their bingo card. So, it looks like something
that's why I was so surprised. I think we've been told that that's impossible, right? The German economy is too conservative, too good, too strong. No way it could happen. And now there it is.
Yeah. And fundamentally, what is hitting Germany, Europe, the US is that the way the lockdowns were done, the COVID lockdowns, it's hard to overestimate how catastrophic they were economically, right? So pumping out that 40%, closing down. I was in Quebec early in the pandemic, and when they first shut, they shut everything down just like the US did early on, and they didn't have the program set up yet, the PPP and the unemployment benefits and all this. And so they did a calculation early on, and they estimated that about half of the GDP was going to be shut down.
Wow.
Okay? That happened here too. But what they then did was printed up so much money that you don't see it in the statistics, right? People didn't feel it. I mean, they were getting paid to kick back on the couch.
I remember.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of us, we were sitting there like, how are American voters, right? With the independence and the manliness and the self-reliance, and yet they were all sitting here like, hold my hand, lock me down harder. And I think that's what
New
explains
York was the worst. I gotta say something. This is two parts I'm gonna bring up real fast. The first one is in New York State, New York City particularly, at 7:00, we would come outside into our porches and out the window and clap for all the workers who are essential workers who are keeping us alive. And I thought, that is next level Stockholm syndrome. That's like next level. Like I couldn't, thank you for jailing me. Oh, my jailer, thank you.
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine that in New York. We talk all the time. And I ran for governor of New York. I'm all about New York. Yeah. And the one thing that bothers me more than anything else is we always talk. We always say, New York tough, New York strong, New York hard. That's a bunch of bullshit. We are New York weak. We're like, lock us down harder, all good. And here's the devastating part for my city. My city right now, commercial real estate is less than 50% full in my city. And it's now 3 years since lockdowns. 1 year since we kind of opened up again. And we're 70%. Because to your point, the wealthy people in New York City, if you're wealthy in New York City, you have at least 2 homes. One in Manhattan usually, maybe Brooklyn, but probably Manhattan. If you work downtown, maybe Brooklyn, but usually Manhattan, and then one someplace else. Jersey Shore, Florida, Colorado,
Long
whatever,
Island,
if you're wealthy.
right.
Long Island, something, right? Someplace else. So they all learn that they can make the same amount of money living in the nicer home, in the nicer neighborhood. So why go back to the city? And they're not going back.
I agree. I have lived in New York. It is wonderful in many ways, but if everything is closed down, boy, I'll tell you, I'd be out of there in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. Yes.
Miami or something. It is not a pleasant place when everything is shut down. And, your point, like, what the hell happened to people? New Yorkers have always been, I remember when I was living there, there were some cops that were trying to do like a right turn, and everybody was walking past them so they couldn't get through. And the cops were there. I sat and watched them. They were there for like 45 seconds, maybe a minute. And they were laughing because like nobody would let the freaking cops through. And I thought, man, that's what I love about New York. You know, people got their own stuff to do. Screw you.
Yes,
you know, I mean, just
absolutely.
like this deep disrespect for authority, you know, love breaking the rules. I mean, that was always, you know, I grew up in Philly. And so for me, I used to love that about New Yorkers. Just they had you know, such balls. And then, with this COVID thing, it was just embarrassing.
It's a self-inflicted wound that no one will take responsibility for. And that really bothers me. They won't even say, look, if I shot myself in the foot, I'm going to go, man, I'm stupid. I shot myself in the foot. I should not do that. That's a bad thing.
That's what it is.
I shot myself in the foot. But they're like, oh my God, someone shot me in the foot. Who's that? I don't know who that person is. And I've got a smoking gun right in my hand. It's insanely bad.
And that's the world that they're trying to build. I think that, you know, in the sort of big government establishment, they view the world as a classroom where you have a teacher and you have a whole bunch of unruly kids who are just absolute animals who will tear each other apart if you don't have government in there controlling stuff. And so what they want, they want to control everything because they see themselves as that teacher. They don't realize who they are, which is they're incompetent, they're corrupt. These are the worst of the worst.
I've met them personally. Yes.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yes. Yeah, I worked down in Washington. These people are absolute idiots. Like, if Americans knew how stupid these people are, they are dishonest. You cannot, you know, trust them further. You can.
I always say they're almost always one of the two: empty heads or empty suits, or both.
Oh yeah, for sure. So the idea that like we need these people to run our lives, it's hilarious. You can only believe that if you're absolute brainwashed by government schools, who of course are staffed by these people or their minions. So, you know, the end result is people get brainwashed. So, I mean, I think one of the biggest. That for a second, if I could. Yep.
During my day job, when New York used to let me work, back in the day, I'm a trainer. So I do for a living. I'm a trainer, consultant. I'm an executive coach, those types of things, business consultant, that kind of stuff. So I've done a lot of training, leadership, and stuff like that. Believe it or not, for a lot of New York City agencies. So I'm with one of the agencies. I don't want to say which one because I'll get in trouble. So one of the New York City agencies doing a training. And they knew that I'd run for governor in the past. They knew that, but I promise I never talk about politics unless it's during a break and someone asks. Otherwise, I shut up, do my job, and go home. So during one of the breaks, if you can imagine, there's a classroom environment, and there's about 20 to 25 people there. They're all between, say, 30 and 60, give or take, all credentialed, all educated. And one of them says during a break, man, I'm so glad we had the Fed during the crash because they really saved us. Now, I said nothing. I just like, don't, Larry, shut up. Don't. So I said nothing until one of the guys actually looked over at me and said, hey, Larry, you're into politics. That's right, isn't it? And I was like, okay, now you messed up because now you invited me in. You just invited the vampire in. You invited the vampire into your house. That was a mistake. You should have done that. That was a mistake. So all I said, and my point is this, I said to them, I said, you know that the Fed is basically just a banking cartel. It's basically what it is, right? And they went, no, it isn't. It's part of the Fed. I said, you have your phones, right? Yeah. Look it up right now. Get your phones, Google it. It's basically a banking cartel. It's basically what it is. And all of a sudden you heard, what? Oh my God. This is a room full of educated adults and they're credentialed and they work for the government. And not one of them knew that. Yeah. Not one. Then I said, and you know, it just prints money, right? No, it doesn't. Yes. It actually just prints money. No, I said, look, you got it on your phone. Look at it. And he literally went there and like, oh my God. And I tell that story often because, to your point, I think most people don't even know. Like they're brainwashed because it's all they know. That guy wasn't stupid. He just never heard anything except the Fed saves us. That's all he's heard. So that's what he knows. He's a smart guy. And once I told him this and showed him it, they all began to rethink. I always go back to the point of my favorite stories is Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell used to be a Marxist. People go, what, was he crazy? No. With the information that he had and his experience at that time, Marxism made sense. Yeah. Then once he learned, he went, oh, and then he worked for the Department of Labor and he went, whoa, okay, this is not the way it works. So he turned because he got more information. And I think one of our issues here, I guess I'm kind of reiterating your point, is that I don't think it's people who are dumb. I think it's people who just don't know any better. We aren't educating them as well. They're more brainwashed and they're not getting through. But I do think shows like this and larger ones, obviously, are slowly getting through.
Yeah, I think, right. These schools are intentionally dumbed down. They're government run.
Yeah.
If government ran the grocery store, then the food would all be rotten. Why we give the government the most important things. People talk about this. They'll say like, healthcare is too important to be left to the private sector. Okay, so you order a pizza and then you call 911 and you see what happens, right?
Right, yes.
It's too important to give to the government. And certainly educating kids, building their character, they are the future voters. The kids are the future of the country. And, I did a test a couple of years ago. Most people, including most professors, they think that we have gotten smarter over time. It's called the Flynn effect. And this didn't jibe for me. And the reason is because if you read a newspaper from 1900, just a standard newspaper, it's almost incomprehensible to most Americans today. They can't understand it. So I went back and I looked at the inaugural speeches for every president. Okay. And, there's only been 25 over the past, 100 years. And these speeches are like 2 pages long. And you can run these things through the Flesch-Kincaid score. Okay. That's the standard measure where you estimate the grade level of a text. So I ran them through Flesch-Kincaid, and here's the bottom line. Using the modern Flesch-Kincaid, the average inaugural speech, now remember, these are aimed at regular voters. Okay, this is a president trying to appeal to the common man, to the 50th percentile voter. He's not trying to talk to the professors. He's trying to talk to voters, right? So he wants it to be relatable and familiar. All right, so these things, you go back to 1900, and they're about 12th to 14th grade level, meaning second year of college. Okay?
Wow.
That's what they are back then. Now, you look at today's speeches, all right? By Obama, it was down to 8th grade.
Wow.
This is Obama's inaugural speech. Trump was at 7th grade. Joe Biden was at 4th grade.
Wow.
So inaugural speeches today are written to be understandable by 10-year-olds.
Wow.
Because that's what they think the median voter is. Now, it's possible that political marketers have gotten so stupid and so bad at their job that they don't understand the median voter. I don't think that's the case.
I don't think so.
It's a highly competitive. Those guys make a ton of money to write those speeches, to consult on that. What kind of word can you use? Do you have to say rising prices, or can you go ahead and use the hard word inflation? Right? I mean, these things are tested out and focus grouped. The bottom line is we are getting astoundingly stupid. And when people talk about us competing with China, I was out in Taiwan teaching for 5 years at a business school over there. Holy cow. I mean, if we don't change something here, we are doomed. I mean, we are like third world level that we're educating most people in this country.
I did a little bit of teaching at Yale and Columbia here in Connecticut and New York, and business school too. And the little time that I was there, many of the students that were there, a lot of them I wouldn't have hired. Like I wouldn't have hired them. A lot of them I would have been like, no thanks. Yeah. And absolutely. This is our best and brightest. And I was like, you know what? No, I wouldn't hire you. So yeah, it was a problem. I completely agree.
I think the only thing holding this country up is that there are still parents who give a crap. So the parents can educate the kids past the level of the school. They don't quite get dragged down to that, really prison yard level. And homeschoolers, and to be honest, recent immigrants work their tails off. And a lot of those kids, I've met a ton of them, Hispanics, Asians, who they love this country. They respect, Second Amendment and the Constitution more than a lot of Americans do. That I think, those things are what's holding us up. But fundamentally, in terms of fixing the country, the government schools have got to go. They're completely captured by unions. The unions use the kids as hostages to squeeze more money. The kids are absolutely traumatized by the experience. It's like an assembly line where the kids are taught that the one goal in life is obedience.
I remember,
not creativity.
You'll like this story.
Yeah.
I pulled my daughters in and out of private and public school and homeschooling throughout the entire system, right? Back and forth. They've all done all of it. So at one point I'm with my oldest daughter, so she was like maybe third grade or so. And the teacher brings me in and goes, Mr. Sharp, we have a problem. Like I can see here, and he's putting paper in front of me. See where your daughter is so and so. She's not concerned with making, with pleasing her teacher. She's not concerned. And I was like, okay, what's the problem? And he was like, no, that's the problem. I'm like, why is that? That's the problem.
Right.
That's amazing. Well, I thought you were praising her. Oh, I'm sorry. You were insulting her. I thought you were praising her. I'm sorry. I misunderstood what you were saying. But that actually happened. I was shocked.
Yeah.
I said, okay. And the next year I pulled her out of school. I literally pulled her out of school. I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm done.
Yep.
And then another school she was in, she was getting bullied. So I've taught my daughter, always fight back. So she fights. Well, you can't do that in schools. You have to call authority figures. No. You cannot. You have to call authority figures. So they called me again. I've been in multiple times for my daughters in the schools. So I go in again, and he's like, Mr. Sharp, your daughter, she fought back. I said, well, this guy's a bully, right? Well, yes, he is a bully. So he's been suspended. Yes, he's been suspended twice already. So the kid who's been suspended twice for bullying already, she fights back, and now she might get bullied. She might get suspended. He goes, yes, you cannot fight back. You have to call one of us, blah, blah. And we made
a guy beating on a girl, and she's in trouble.
Correct.
I mean, just
yes.
Yeah.
So literally, I say, wait a minute. So she's in trouble? Yes, we usually suspend her for a day. I say, do it for a week. I'll take her on vacation. I literally told him that. He's like, what? I said, yeah, do it for a week. Please, do it for a week. Right. He's like, but it'll be in her record. I said, I don't care about your record. Do it for a week. I said, I will reward her. I love it. Thank you. And he's like, what? Well, and here's the thing that's most important. Once I said that, he didn't. And the reason why he didn't was because he wanted my compliance. He actually wanted to teach her a lesson. He wanted compliance. And when I declined to comply, he's like, why bother suspending her? I can't get his compliance.
And that's a key point. There are a lot of people who can't afford to take their kids out of school. Correct. Maybe they need two incomes. Once the kids are 12 or something, probably 10, they can, honestly, they can manage themselves. But anyway, a lot of parents
in New York
think
State, 13, New York State, they will literally take your kids away in New York State unless they're 13. Correct.
That is nuts. But
that is insane. It's insanely dumb, but it is my state.
For sure. But for all those parents who feel like they can't take their kids out of school, I think it's really important for people to understand that you have a duty to fight back.
Yes.
To do whatever you can to give counter programming to your kids. Go back to the immigrants. There are a lot of recent immigrants who come to the U.S. and they live in the worst neighborhoods with the worst schools possible. And those kids, they go on to become dentists. Yep. Okay. The kids are successful. 100%. How do they do that? Parents counter programming schools.
Yes. And also you'll find that they will go out of their way. They will pool their money to send their kids to Catholic school.
Yes.
They will send their kids. They will pool all of their money to put their kids into a Catholic school, because many of them are Catholic, right? Not all of them, many of them are.
Right. Yep.
In the case of where I live, there's a lot of Eastern Europeans, and they'll put their kids in Greek school, which is Eastern Orthodox Greek. They'll put their kids in Greek school. They'll pool their money. Right. And they'll put their kids in Greek school just so they can get their kids out of the public school. You are completely correct. So let me do a little bit of admin, if I could, for a second. To my audience, if you are listening, please, if you like this, do me a favor, click that like button. I have to get past Al Gore. Algorithm. That's correct. I got to get past the algorithms. I need to. Let me beat Al Gore by please clicking the like button. It does matter. It's how I get by it. If you happen to be watching on Twitter, retweet this right now. Right? If you want to be watching on Twitter, please retweet it. Let people know this is going on. It does matter. It's how we move forward. If you're watching on Larry Sharp YouTube, you can super chat me if you want to support the show or get your chat to the front. Just super chat and we'll be good. If you love me because you love me, which I know you all do, just support me on Patreon. $10 a month keeps the show going. I spend less time talking to New York City agencies and more time doing this. I know you want that. So head up to patreon.com/Sharpway. That will make that happen. It helps tremendously. But more importantly, please, the good doctor has been good to us. Mr. St. Onge has done a very good job giving us some love. So give him some love. Follow him on Twitter at Prof. St. Onge. That's PROFSTONGE. Support him on Twitter. If you want to follow his other things, they're all, check out the YouTube and the Facebook page, see what he's doing, check out all the other good stuff. Please do that and support him. It really does matter. Let me grab a couple comments if I could. I had a bunch of them. Sarah says, if anyone's going to indoctrinate my children, it's me. Well, yes, Sarah. I agree completely.
Yes, they are your children. They do not belong to the state.
Absolutely. Grace is happy. Go ahead.
And, the thing is, as a parent, if those kids turn out good, that's on you. If the kids turn out bad, that's on you. All right. The government is there to control them. The government is not there to deal with the consequences. So these are your parents. This is your core responsibility.
All the government will do is put them in a cage.
Yep, that's correct.
That's all the government will do. The government will put them in a cage. Nothing else is but put them in a cage. Anything else on you. Yes, absolutely. Grace says, great show. But she also brings up she brings the idea of everything being too big to fail.
Yes.
And I think that's still true, right? It's still true. And she's upset because she got triggered. So she's been posting the entire day. She's like, this topic triggers me. That's great. Absolutely.
It is triggering. It should be triggering. This is part of the cartelization. This is what big business tries to do, is that they want to put themselves in a situation where they want to grab some kind of human shield, some kind of hostage that they can use to pressure government to give them money whenever they screw up. GM has done this time and time again. The banks are world champions at it every single time they screw something up. They squeeze another $1 trillion out of the taxpayer. And every time it's the same deal where, they roll out, grandma's going to be eating dog food. And, they go on and, they did it with the debt ceiling. Every single time it's the same game, which is when the sun is shining, you build a system that puts us all, or makes us all vulnerable. Right. Makes us all dependent on that business or on that deficit or whatever it is. So they set it up when we're not looking to make us vulnerable. And then when the storm comes, they say, hey, presto. So you guys got to bail me out because look, otherwise, we saw that with Silicon Valley Bank, that you had all these small businesses and they were all cranking out. They were like, look at this single mother in Ohio and she's got, whatever. $1 million in Silicon Valley Bank. And, part of you was thinking, well, I'm not sure $1 million in the bank is quite, but anyway, they were looking hard for these human interest stories. And that's fundamentally what the game is about. And so, the problem is that voters usually don't pay attention to this stuff until the crisis comes. And by the time the crisis comes, it is too late because they have already infiltrated themselves and made themselves necessary to you, at which point the solution is you just rip off the freaking Band-Aid. That's what should have happened in 2008. Wall Street would have gone 100%. Bust. The banks would have survived because the banks would have been bought at a bankruptcy. Like Warren Buffett, or there were a couple of banks that did not, gamble in the casino, like BB&T. Those prudent ones, Charles Schwab, there were a bunch of outfits that were capable of buying a bank. So if Citibank and Morgan and Goldman, if they all went to zero, their shareholders get wiped out. They go into, bankruptcy, and then Charles Schwab Company would have bought them, or Warren Buffett would have bought them. Yeah. And they wouldn't have been run that way in the future because their heads would be like on a pike warning future banks, don't screw around because we will let you fail.
My NSA FBI agent, he is joking. He means figuratively. So my FBI agent who's listening right now, he's joking. Figuratively, he means that.
My guy's probably going to text me too. Yeah.
Exactly.
Nobody in the country until you got an NSA minded.
Absolutely.
So we had a golden opportunity to, reset the rules so that banks understand that if they fail, they fail alone.
Yes.
And, the banks unleashed the mother of all PR campaigns. They were calling up every Republican, every Democrat, because at the time, initially Congress did not want to bail these jokers out. Wall Street is about the lowest polling industry in America. They're like right above cigarettes. Okay. So nobody wanted to bail these jokers out. And they pulled out all stops. They were like begging. By the time he got done with it, it was the entirety of Congress that was on board. Now, whether that was money talking, whatever influenced them to change their minds, there it is. And I think what most, Americans walked away from that experience, whether you're on the left or the right, a lot of people were disgusted by that. They felt like it is a fundamentally corrupt system, that the game is rigged. And we saw two big movements come out of that, right? We saw Tea Party and Occupy. They both came out at almost at the same time because they were pissed off the exact same thing. They should have been natural allies. We were on the same team. And of course, the establishment then went to its next stage, which is setting them against each other. These guys are racist. These guys are communists. Same thing they do every single time. Divide and conquer. just like the central banks with the, was it the workers or was it the greedy capitalists? Every single time they do it.
Absolutely. 100%. Let me grab a couple more comments if I could.
Yep.
Joe says 2023 already has more in bank assets than have gone under than in 2008. Wow. Absolutely. So, Ro, you have a fan. Ro says Peter's great. You got some fans
right
here.
On. Thank you, Ro.
There we go. Absolutely. But we are too big to fail still, right? I mean, I think we still are too big to fail. We haven't changed. Your point's a valid one.
We haven't changed anything. All of it's gotten worse, for sure.
Yes. But President Biden says the economy is great, says Joel. What's going on? I don't
understand.
Is
always going to say that, isn't he? Yeah, what? 90% of the job creation since Biden took power has been returning from work.
Right.
So if you exclude those jobs, then Trump is far and away he even blows away Reagan, just an amazing job creator. We all forget back then, you had jobs in the poorest areas of America, inner cities. Right. You had jobs in communities that had not seen jobs in a generation.
Right.
Everybody was doing great. And then they had this stupid COVID thing, which was the opportunity of a lifetime for them, a bad flu to lock down the entire world. And so now, of course, Joe Biden wants to claim credit for, right. You had a bunch of Democrat states that kept the lockdowns, kept those jobs suppressed just until the election was over. And then, what a miracle. My gosh, we had millions of jobs all at once.
Well, I think there's another piece, and Kim brings this up. She says, everything is still closed down. Store closed at 7 p.m., restaurants at 9, and many are still open on Mondays. And I think that's a very valid point. Right? I live in New York City, and New York City used to be the city that never sleeps. Right? That nothing ever closed, 24 hours a day. You can go any place you want and get whatever you wanted at 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. Who cares? You can get it. Sunday, you can get whatever you want on Sundays. It doesn't really matter, whatever. It's always some place to go. But I think Kim is right. The lockdowns, which I never call the plague or the COVID, I always call it the lockdown. So does she. When the lockdowns happened, I think it did something, right? If you affect somebody for 2 weeks, that's temporary. But if you affect somebody for 2 years, that changes habits. Like that's habit forming. Things change. And I feel like she's right. I think I see in New York, there's more stuff shut down that wasn't. There's more people doing less hours, there's still fear. There's still people who wear masks to this day in New York.
It's insane.
I think it has changed.
Yeah, well, some of that is, like when somebody gets old and they used to go fly on vacation and now they just drive local and then they just take a walk in the neighborhood and then they just walk to the TV and finally they're in bed. Okay. And I think that's a lot of what's happening in places like New York or San Francisco. So you got these businesses, they've been there, they have, they already spent all the money to build out the bodega or whatever. They're not going to go and shut it down, but there's no customers. And they keep thinking maybe things will change. So they're reducing the hours, then they don't have to pay the people as much, or, they're trying to cut costs so they can just barely hold on. But I think when you start seeing that, a bunch of little neighborhood stores close or trimming their hours, I think that's a concern. And, I grew up in Philly and there's a lot of neighborhoods. I think it's the same in New York. I lived in Manhattan, so that's a weird place. But anyway, if you walk around the neighborhoods, what you'll see a lot is that on the corner of a block, you'll have a house that has like a plate glass window, okay? And it's got like a step up on the corner. Like it used to be a store, but it's not a store anymore.
Right.
All right. And when you start looking for these, you will see them all over. I'm guessing in Brooklyn. I know in Philadelphia. I mean, just almost every corner in residential neighborhoods in American cities, 50 years ago was a store. It was a store, something or other. It was, they were cutting hair. They were, it was
when I grew up as a kid in the Bronx, when you said, I'm going to the corner, that meant the store. You didn't have to say store. You said, go to the corner and get me some cigarettes. Go to the corner and get me some bread. Go to the corner and get me. You meant the store when you said corner. You're totally correct. Yes.
Yeah. Every corner was a store. And now you walk around these neighborhoods, and to me, it's depressing. It's like walking through a graveyard. You see all these places that used to be thriving businesses. They put somebody's kids through college. The kids would come home on the way home from school and get an apple from the fruit guy. He'd say, how you doing at school? You doing good? Give them a little apple. You had these just alive communities that were all built on small business. And now those are gone. the regulations have just hunted those like dogs.
100%.
Yeah. And so now,
We
when
did
people buy,
in New York City, we recently did a change to crush our bodegas. And
Yes.
people don't know, bodegas are an integral part of New York City, particularly the Bronx, but many parts of the city. There's some in Brooklyn. You find them here or there in Queens. Manhattan, obviously, a lot of Manhattan, northern Manhattan, uptown specifically. A lot of bodegas. They're almost always immigrant run.
Mm-hmm.
They used to be run almost only by people who are either Dominican, Puerto Rican, used to be. Now they're heavily people from the Middle East often run them, but they're almost always, immigrants. And they're small businesses, and your point is valid. That's putting their kid through private school or through college, or so that's making the next dentist. You're completely correct.
Yeah, right.
That store is making the next dentist. There's no doubt it is. So we decided, because of, I guess, safety or maybe the environment or something, that we're going to change how bodegas have to put up their signs. It made all the bodegas have to redo all their signs.
Yep.
They can't afford to redo all their signs. So a lot of bodegas simply don't have signs anymore. So now you look around, you have bodegas with no signs because they can't afford the new ones. And they'll find them if they keep the old one up. So no sign. You just have to know the bodegas there. Luckily, most of them are, again, on the corner. Most of them are there, so people kind of know, but we don't know if it's open or not necessarily. Unless the sign light's on, then we know the bodega's open, right? So, I mean, there's an issue.
And that's this year. Next year it's going to be a green ventilation system, or they got the pizza ovens.
Already happening. The pizza things already happening.
One after the next, this stuff comes out, and every single one of those is another 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. So if you've already got stores cutting their hours, closing at 7 p.m., and then on top of that, you're loading this crap on year after year after year. It's like every July 1st. These guys get to open up their mail and see how many tens of thousands they're going to have to shell out.
Right.
You know exactly what's going to happen is that, the ones who are older, they're going to run out the clock, they're going to retire, and they're going to convert it into a house. Once again, another dead business. And once it's dead, it will never come back. Sorry?
Which I did a video in 2018. It's another thing that happens also about my area where I live in Astoria. And I went to an area in Astoria, and I walked around and showed, and I said, these places here, there are some businesses that we know. I said, but what's happening in all areas, to including this one, is that the local people leave, and what winds up coming in is a franchise.
Yeah.
The franchise comes in because franchise is actually big business, right? They're able to lobby, right? If McDonald's comes in, it might be, you might say it's a small business because it's franchise, but that owner doesn't live in the neighborhood. That owner lives in Connecticut. And he's got 15 different McDonald's. There's another one he bought. That's what that is. So it's still big business, run by the McDonald's Corporation as a general rule. And I remember I tell a story where when I grew up in the Bronx, there was a pizza place called Joe's Pizza. It's on 161st Street. Anybody who knows, right by Yankee Stadium. It's where I grew up. And it was called Joe's Pizza. I used to go there. And it was my first time I understood inflation. I was probably 7 or 8 years old. I don't forget how I was a kid. And I used to go buy pizza for 40 cents a slice. And I went there one time and I gave 50 cents to get my slice of pizza. And he gave me back a nickel. And I said, you made a mistake. Right? You got to give me a dime, right? Because he goes, no, the price went up. I was like, the price went up? What?
The Fed took it.
That
money went to Wall Street, baby. No,
that's correct.
That money's gone.
Yes.
That's your Wall Street tax.
So I learned that lesson, right? So, but why that matters to me most is because Joe retired. He was an immigrant from Italy. He then retired and he gave it to his daughter, and it became Paula's Pizza, who was his daughter. I met his daughter. She worked there at the place, and it was very nice. Now it's a Subway.
Yes. That's correct.
Exactly my point. So I was saying, you go around, what happens is all small businesses go away. And now franchises come in. And in my neighborhood that I said in 2018, we lost local stores. Mike's Diner is gone. The local bakeries are all gone. But and we replaced them. Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, 7-Eleven. That's what replaced them all. Taco Bell.
Go to small. Yeah, no, you go to small towns all across America, you got nothing left but a McDonald's, a gas station, maybe a liquor store, and that's it. And then you got a Walmart 10 miles away. That's it.
Absolutely.
Nothing else. And the reason is because those big businesses, they have a whole department to sit there and work out the whole compliance thing. All these new laws that come out, whether it's green, whether it's worker mandates, whatever excuse they got for it. The little mom and pops do not. And so they're living on borrowed time. One by one, they drop off.
And people don't get this, which is why I want to go to the next piece. And this is the thing that you brought up, which I love, the idea of a belief industrial complex. The idea that there are people who are purposefully using propaganda or the mainstream media or whatever to get us to believe that this is all the fault of big greedy corporations, even though if we look with our eyes, that's not what's happening, right? If we look with our eyes, it's the government that's crushing us. It's the government that's destroying us, but they keep getting us to believe that this is all because of evil corporations. That's the reason. Meanwhile, every politician is in a pocket of, they're the same. Corporations and government are basically being the same now, but it's all bad. And the worst part that drives me nuts about this is the average American thinks every business owner is evil because they conflate the business owner with someone who's wealthy, like some mega corporation guy. And the guy or gal who runs that local bodega or that local barber shop or that local diner, that guy or gal is nowhere near this rich, wealthy person. They're making good money, but it's all going back into the store. And anyone who's been an entrepreneur knows this. I've done it myself, particularly in 2009 when I had my worst years. There were many days, many months where my employees got paid and I didn't.
Yes.
That happened many times. And anyone who's at a small business knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, anybody in America can start a small business. You got these people protesting and throwing rocks and comps and whatnot. Well, they can go and, you can just start a business and then you get to see how it is. It is not printing millions of dollars. It's hard work. You got to be there all the time. Exactly as you say, if the business loses money, you are on the hook. You are the one who, you got to borrow money from a friend because the business is making a profit. And, but the kind of wider picture here is that that's how the government gets away with so much, is that by politicizing these topics, so like big business cutting corrupt deals with politicians, in a democracy, like if you put that up to a vote in honest terms and you said, do you think that, whatever, JP Morgan should be able to bribe politicians doing this? I mean, you got to be kidding, right? 99%. The only guy who would vote for is the guy who didn't understand the question. But yet they do it. Right. Yeah. And yet they do it. And it's on both sides. It's Republicans and Democrats both. I guarantee 100%. You no Republican voter wants to bail out Wall Street. No Democrat voter wants to bail out Wall Street. So why do we bail out Wall Street? And the reason is because when they politicize the topic, they get 50% against 50%, and then they get to be the kingmaker. So the trick here is to see through that bull crap and understand that this is the people against the powerful. We need to get big business. We need to get the rich. We need to get all of this, the nonprofits, the teachers unions. We need to get all of these special interests out of the government. The government would shrink so massively. I mean, you could cut it 90, 95%.
Absolutely.
And still get to a functioning country. And then when we've achieved that, which we all agree on, then we can talk about whatever remaining disagreements there are. But I don't believe there will be many. I think the vast majority of things we fight over is because the government rolls in there and forces something. And the thing is, once you politicize a topic, you have to obey, right? You don't have the option of live and let live anymore. Right. So, once the government is running the schools, then you either have to teach LGBT or you have to not teach it. And nobody can opt out. So the solution is get the government the heck out of there. Let parents choose whatever school they want. If you're a Muslim and you don't want your kids exposed to LGBT in 4th grade, you have that. First of all, you have that as a human right. Secondly, at that point, you don't fight over it. If you want your kids to be raised this way, you choose a school. So you multiply that across the entire economy, and every time government steps into something, it turns it into a war of all against war, where one side must win and the other side must lose, and everybody's backs are up against the wall. So easy solution, get government out of it.
Well, let me go one step further. By the way, Lars Mapstairs, when the president says, live and let live, he says, hold on, grab it real fast. He says, live and let live, let's go. He's all in. He's with you. Absolutely. Yes. He goes on to say, people against the powerful. I love it. But there's a worse part of this, I think, is that now we have a situation to where, since it's all out war and the world's going to end if I lose, a victory for me isn't my life getting better. A victory for me is other guy losing. So if the other guy loses, I win, right? In theory, but that's not really what's happening. What's happening is I beat the other guy now, and I go out to my friends. We won. What happened? We beat the libs, or we beat the Trumpster, or whatever side I'm on, right? We beat them. Right. Great, but who actually won? Well, the people at top. They both won. They all win. we keep
The
losing.
guys on top got suckered, and the war never ends because, remember, everybody's backed up against the wall.
Right.
You can win a victory against parents and indoctrinate their kids, but they will never give up. So all of these battles between people, they never end because they're existential questions. So take those existential questions out of the hands of the political process.
Well, you've said something though. You're saying that all of this, the way the government's been doing this with the media is through censorship recently. That's been a huge part. And I remember, I think you're old enough to remember, me too, that there was a time when the Republicans were the censorious ones, right? It was back in the late 70s. I mean, it was weird. Like the Republicans were the ones like, oh, don't show a girl's boob or something, or whatever. They were the ones who were all censorious and don't do this and all this stuff. And the Democrats all like, everybody should say whatever. Now it's the reverse. It's like, my God, the Republicans like, I don't care, say what you want. And the Democrats like, no, don't say the thing. But the problem, two things I want to bring up with
power
this.
corrupts.
Number one is, yes, but two points I want to bring up and you brought up. One of them is you think that it's failing, that citizen journalism is kind of marching to the rescue, and that it's actually making Americans, which America has been a trend of going left for a long time, that it's kind of bringing them back towards conservatism because of a rebellion against censorship. Did I kind of get that right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the censorship that we've seen over the past couple of years is kind of the dying, like the sting in the tail in Lord of the Rings as it falls into the chasm and you get this last stab. And I think fundamentally, if you kind of zoom out and look at the big picture, the internet changed everything. All right, because before the internet, conservatives, libertarians had no way of reaching people, right? You get people in media who say, oh, I miss the old days when everybody agreed. Well, yeah, everybody agreed because there was a party line. It was this center left, sort of who would be like Hillary Clinton, basically. Well, like all of us had to believe Hillary Clinton things. Everybody
loved Bill Clinton in the 90s.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we loved him. He was playing the saxophone on Arsenio. We were like, he's the coolest guy in the world. Whatever he says is right. I guess we should be bombing people in Yugoslavia, I guess. Sure, because Bill Clinton tells us to, so it's fine.
That was the package deal, And back then, you had a lapdog media. It was almost impossible to get anything out. You had like local cable access, maybe. So you were reaching about 50 people. And then that started breaking in the 1980s with talk radio. So you had Rush Limbaugh was really the breakout star there. And then, I mean, once the internet came in, it just absolutely took off, right? So blogs, social media. And in all these cases, what happened is that they all got dominated by the other than mainstream perspectives, right? So the mainstream had been sitting here dominating through CNN and New York Times and the rest of it. But it turns out nobody wanted that garbage. Okay. What people wanted, whether it was further to left or further to the right, people did not want that. And so once you had the ability to read blogs or to read news that you like, that's where people went. And so I think the establishment panicked. They said, what? Not only are we losing our monopoly, we're losing the entire audience. If you look at like New York Times, okay, they will put out a tweet. They've got 55 million followers on Twitter. They will put out a tweet and they'll get about 1/10 the engagement that Joe Rogan does. Okay, this is the New York Times. The New York Times is the mothership of the entire media complex. What the New York Times, they're the band leader. What they say, everybody else imitates. I mean, they are God in media. Right. And they've got 1/10 the engagement of what was he, a former referee and color commentator? I mean, the old media is dead. Yeah. I love Joe Rogan, but the point is the fact that he's 10x New York Times is shocking to these guys. So I think that once they recognized that, they freaked out. And so they clamped down everything they could. They deployed, all of the corruption, all the government connections. They swung money whatever direction government wanted. They did favors for governments, things that we would have considered unconstitutional. I think they also tried to take over. They took over the cable area. They went and took over the Arizona cable first. That was their next step. Yeah. Right? So and now even that's dying. I mean, if you look at cable now, I mean, if they're lucky, they're getting what?
1 million people a night if they're lucky.
Yeah,
And,
for
and
sure.
there's many podcasts that get more than 1 million people watching, right? And they're
for
lucky
sure. Yeah.
if they get 1 million.
Well, and you can tell the difference. Like if you go on TV, you might get, I mean, you can be on, primetime programming on a top show, and you might get 1 or 2 people who talk to you afterwards and say, hey, I like the show. Hey, why don't you talk about this? All right, 1 to 2. You go on a medium-sized podcast, you get like 5, 10. Okay, so a medium-sized podcast apparently has 5x the audience of a primetime TV show. So absolutely, the ball's in our court. I understand why they tried to censor so hard, because they are losing. They were absolutely getting, their clocks cleaned. So they did what they could, but it was always a matter of time. Whether it was Parler, which they gutted, that was shameful, that whole episode, or whether it's Nostr or Elon, of course, is doing great things. One way or the other, free speech. Speech wants to be free. And I love what Elon's doing. If, Elon moves on to something else, then there will be other outlets. But the point is, I am very, very optimistic. A lot of people, I think, who don't like where the establishment is, I think a lot of people get depressed because they look at the news and they're like, man, we just keep losing. And no, you got to look at the big picture here. And the big picture here is that we are winning under the surface. I'll give an example. Universal school choice has now hit, I want to say 9 states or so. I mean, it is spreading like a wildfire.
It is. Even in New York.
Yeah.
It's spreading in New York.
Yeah. Homeschooling in general, in the 1970s, homeschooling was illegal in every single state of the union. Now there's, New York and a couple of other states. It is legal. It's just a real pain in the rear.
Yes,
but it is legal everywhere in the country. Constitutional carry. Okay, there are some things where we care about it a lot, and we are absolutely winning. And, when I zoom out and look at the big picture, every time that we get free speech, you remember early on, Joe Biden would put out his videos and they would get like millions of dislikes. And then finally they disabled the dislike feature. Right. Every single time that the people speak, they scream that they want anti-establishment opinions, whether it's right, whether it's left. Americans are absolutely disgusted with the elite. And I think they are doomed. It is just a matter of time.
Well, look at the people running on left and right. Guys like Vivek Ramaswamy on the right trying to get more screaming. RFK Jr., clearly the most popular guy right now, going crazy. Even Cornel West, Dr. Cornel West, he's getting some play. Like everybody who's like the rebel is getting play. I think you're completely correct. And many of them are literally being shut out on mainstream media, and it's not working. Like they're still getting play, even
that's what's so glorious about
they won't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Tucker's getting, he got like 130 million views on one of his recent videos. His old show had like 3 million viewers, 3 or 5 million, something like that. Okay, he is 20x. RFK, he did a town hall. It got 8 million views.
Yes.
Again, I mean, that's got to be 10 or 50 times higher than any town hall. Yeah.
Trump only got 3 million the last time he did, which for CNN, 3 million is 10x what they usually get. So for CNN, that was amazing. But that was still not, I mean, News Nation is trying their best to become some kind of middle ground. They're trying, right? And they're doing a job, right? It's there, right? We'll see what happens. But they're trying. They jump on this because they're like, we don't care. We need eyeballs. And that's literally the free market working. Look, we need eyeballs. We'll take RFK, even though some of the establishment get mad at us, but we'll do it. And they explode 8 million for News Nation.
Oh yeah,
I mean, News Nation gets maybe 100,000 people watching it during a night. And they got 8 million. It's crazy. So let me do some admin if I could one more time, guys.
Yes, sir.
If you're watching the show, listening to the show, please click the like button. If you like what I'm saying, click the like button. It does matter. Every bit counts so that people can see it. It does matter. If you're watching on Twitter, retweet this right now. Let people know I'm on. They can see this is important. If you hadn't been on Larry Sharpe YouTube, you can always, if you want to, you can always super chat me if you want to. But no matter what, please support the good professor if you would. He's given us literally an hour of his time. He's been good to us. He's showing us love. Show him some love. Head on over to the description on YouTube or Facebook. See what he's doing. Follow him. Check his stuff out. Or just follow him on Twitter. Right there, you could. If you're listening to this, it's Prof. St. Onge. That's ProfStonge. Very helpful if you do that. I want to say thank you for that if you could. One more thing I want to do, just because Just because people know this. Grace says, Americans need to hear this. Like, comment, and share. Yes, Grace is correct. Do as Grace says. Do as Grace says. She is correct. Please follow her. So, yes. So, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to do a little bit of admin. Please go ahead.
No, yeah, I was going to mention the science thing. You brought that up when I first came on. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the issue, right? The idea of censorship. You've said something which I think is very controversial, but I think utterly true and should be obvious. But I think most people...
It should be obvious. Yeah, I agree.
Should be. But I know a lot of people who disagree completely. And you say that with censorship, there can be no science. That they literally are in opposition. They are direct opposition of the two. That they can't be done and that it destroys science. And you said something else. You've said that all important critical pieces of science have come from the rebel, come from the guy who's gone against what's established science. But we seem to not get it ever. And so many of my friends, I live in New York City, many of them are Democrats, many of them are more left, and they agree completely with censoring people. In fact, I'll give you a little example. Not science, but you'll get the mindset of it. When I will go out to get signatures to get on the ballot, we would say things like, hey, can you please help me get my friend on the ballot? And they say, what do you mean? Well, so that if someone wants to vote for him, they could vote for him. He needs signatures to get on the ballot. Well, what's he stand for? Well, no, you don't have to vote for him. It isn't to vote for him. It's just to get him on the ballot as a choice. Well, no, he might take votes for my guy. No. They would literally say no.
Right.
They would actively censor someone. And I think that's common throughout everything. And I even hear on science, I've heard people totally agree with the idea of you can't say these things because people might believe them all the time. I'm sorry, I went long, but this piece really bothers me.
Yeah,
Please
for sure.
Keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that's the superpower of science, the reason why science is cool. And it is. I mean, it is one of the most amazing inventions of the past 500 years, arguably 100%. The most amazing. And science does not mean smart people. Science means one thing and one thing alone, which is nobody is censored. That is the meaning of science. All right. Science means that anybody can come and make their case. Even crazy people like flat earthers can make their case. And then we're going to sit down and go through the facts and the logic, and we're going to talk it out. And then we're going to decide based on fact and logic who is correct. All right. And there's a great book. It's by Bill Bryson called The Short History of Nearly Everything. He wrote in, I want to say, in 2003. And he went through a whole bunch of sort of foundational scientific facts that we now believe, things like plate tectonics and evolution and particle physics. And every single one of them, okay, you had a scientific elite that was doing the wrong thing. They were working with the wrong models. And then you had some nut job outsider. Darwin was a college dropout backpacker. He hitched a ride on a boat and, he raised some money so he could go on this boat trip. And then he collected, I think it was beetles and then birds. And, Einstein was a patent clerk. These guys were all outsiders. They were fought tooth and nail by the scientific establishment because what happens is science looks for the truth. The scientific establishment protects its own salaries. It has nothing to do with science. Right. It is like the gatekeepers. It's the guardians. And so, yes, you go to them to discover what's the current state of the science. Okay. But the thing is, when you're dealing with any kind of new question, all right, and what's getting censored is new questions, not old questions. All right. New questions like about, certain factors related to COVID, or, gender policy or global warming. Okay. What gets censored is the new stuff. And with the new stuff, if you are censoring opinions, that is no longer science. One single opinion censored. If you censor flat earthers, then you can't believe geology anymore. All right. You can censor nobody. If you do, that is not science anymore. It is gossip column. It is propaganda. And in fact, once you censor a field, because in our sort of modern country, because there's so much government money in quote unquote science, if there is any censorship, not only does that field become no longer credible, but at that point it becomes pure propaganda because the government money takes over. And now whatever the alleged science is going to depend on who's paying it. And the government overwhelmingly is paying for that. They do things like academic grants. So, Anthony Fauci or most macroeconomists, for example, get money from the Fed either directly or indirectly. So, of course, they say exactly what the Fed wants. Now, macroeconomics
you made a minor mistake. You said Fauci without saying His Eminence before.
Yes, correct. Yeah, that's
His Holiness.
I forgot all of his honorifics.
His Holiness. Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, and so that I think is, and I mean, I would think it's obvious. This has always been the single value of science. If science is censored, not only is it no longer science, it no longer has any value.
Yes.
If I'm trying to build a bridge and some group of guys is like shutting out, anybody with an opinion they don't like, or if they're doing it because they're getting paid, then I'm not going to trust what those guys tell me anymore. That is compromised science. So I think it's 100%. Absolutely critical, especially today, because governments use this compromised science to bully people and to gaslight. So, for example, we're seeing that on certain gender issues to do with kids, where the science claims certain correlations with suicide. Well, if you're an academic and you publish a paper that says the opposite, I actually know a guy who works at Heritage who wanted to publish a paper saying the opposite, and he got fired from a major university down in Arkansas. At that point, that is not science. We are flying blind. And governments use this as if it is the science. There's a great quote that, a lot of these attacks on science, what they do is they take a trusted institution, they gut it, and then they wear it like a skin suit. And people have to understand that a lot of these, whether it's Harvard Medical School, a lot of these organizations that have stellar reputations, they're not what you think anymore. And a big part of that is the censorship. You can no longer trust them. The onus is on them to prove that they don't censor. They have to invite the absolute craziest skeptics in and destroy them with logic. And until they're ready to do that, then it ain't science.
I completely agree. And it does two things that drive me crazy. One is, as a society, we should, and I mean should, obviously we don't, we should trust our institutions. We should have institutions that we trust. We should believe in them. We should think they're good. We should. But your point is a valid one. We don't. And they've given us reasons not to. Like, we're right to not trust them. That's not good for a society, right? We should have transparent, But the second piece is now it takes away the idea that I have to defend anything. And I should, right? And I look at this politically. Like, people often tease me and say, Larry, why do you have people on your show who aren't libertarians? Because I believe that I'm correct and that I can show you that I'm correct regardless of who's in front of me. That I can give you an actual argument and tell you and show you that I care more, that I'm right, that my ideas are better in front of anybody. I don't care who the person is. The second I don't do that, I'm a propagandist.
That's exactly right. I want Keynesians to talk because they're embarrassing. And in fact, the biggest I love it if they have a big audience, because then I can show how stupid they are in front of a big audience. I absolutely 100%. Want them to talk. So anybody who's trying to silence you, they are not, they're not a good faith actor anymore. That's not how you do it.
Absolutely. Well, you've gained at least one new fan. Sarah now says, now following Peter's podcast. So you got at least one. Awesome. You might get some more.
Thank you,
at least one. Yes. Missy says, please hit the like button. It really helps and it's free. Missy is correct. Please do what Missy says. She's correct. People are supporting me today. I like that. Absolutely. It's absolutely true. So if I could remember, guys, please hit the like button. I know I say it a lot, but please do it. So is there anything that I didn't talk about that we should have brought up that you want to bring up before we wrap this up? Something you want to promote, talk about your own podcast or something else you're doing, anything else you want to talk about, please.
Yeah, well, I do daily videos on economics and freedom, and I've got those wrapped up. I do weeklies on a podcast. That's what Sarah was talking about. And just because it's hard to follow the dailies, they're all over the place. But anyway, I do a lot of topics there. A lot of stuff we talked about today, that's the kind of stuff I cover. So I hope people will give that a listen.
There we go. Guys, I want to say everyone who was watching and listening, thank you so much for it. I appreciate it. If you're watching this live, know that I'll be on again at 7 p.m. On the Moral Government podcast. So feel free talking about believe it or not, marriage issues. I know it's kind of odd, but yes, I'll be doing that. Please listen to me then if you would. And of course, like, comment, share. It does matter. I will see you all